Members of the committee, if you all would find your seats. There are no quorum requirements.
There are quorum requirements, right?
No.
Why don't you just let the chair?
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our second Budget and Finance meeting of the new term, new year. Our first piece of legislation is RS 2013-845, sponsored by Councilman Stein, which approves an Economic and Community Development Incentive Grant to the Industrial Development Board for the benefit of UBS. I thought that just to get us all on the same page that we might start with Mr. Wiltshire. I do need a motion first. May I have a motion? In a second, and Matt will do a brief overview for us before we open it for questions. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should first recognize Rena Martinolich from UBS, who is here as well, and Tom Turner from the Nashville Downtown Partnership that can address the next resolution for consideration. But the quick overview, UBS, which as many of you no doubt recall, in 2000 acquired Payne Weber, which had just acquired J.C. Bradford, has operated in Nashville for over a decade, and UBS for almost 100 years in this market as a leading financial services firm. Today, UBS has approximately 240 employees at their Perimeter Hill Drive facility at I-24 and Harding. These are back office professionals, but providing sort of high levels of services. So if a broker is selling a particular financial product and needs additional information about it, the Nashville site is where they call for that information. The project under consideration is the expansion of that and the addition of an anticipated 1,000 new employees. Those employees would provide, again, back office functions serving the broader UBS organization. And I should say UBS is a publicly traded financial services firm with investment banking, wealth management, and asset management services operating globally. So this operations center will serve UBS's operations across the U.S. and provide attractive, high-paying jobs. They will be moving into what was formerly known as the Region Center, 315 Dedrick, where they have an existing, or they've now signed a lease for 98,000 square feet, and they'll be moving into that facility. The specific proposal that we have for consideration by the committee today and the council tomorrow is for a resolution for the economic development grant that the council authorized for projects having 500 or more incremental employees, which this project obviously doubles that. And so the payment is for $500 per job for 5 years. So if they had all 1,000 incremental employees for all 5 years, that would be $500,000 a year for 5 years, or $2.5 million total. The numbers are obviously going to fluctuate, and there have been questions about the accountability provisions. This essentially is structured almost as a self-regulating proposal in the sense that we only pay for those employees that we actually have. So if they start out with up 600 employees, and we're not paying for the 240 employees that they have today, so it's only incremental employees. So if they're up 600 one year, we pay for the 600, $300,000. If they're up 800 the next year, it'll be $400,000. And if they drop to up only 700, or for a total of 940 employees, that's what we would pay for the next year. So all in, if they meet their expectations of 1,000 incremental employees for 5 years, that would be $2.5 million. The state is in for $5 million, so we're in for less, half of what the state is in for. And they can begin this anytime they choose within 3 years of receiving their use and occupancy certificate. So if the hiring is more slow than they anticipated, they could choose to defer it from 12/31/13 as a measurement date to 12/31/14. The city benefits from not having from pushing out when it makes its payments, and the company would therefore benefit from having a higher number of employees for each of the 5 years. But once they start that clock ticking, it runs for 5 consecutive years. And then the one piece that's a little bit different about this legislation versus some others that you've seen is that we've agreed to pay for non-UBS badged employees, those contractors who are, one, dedicated to UBS, and two, who are paid more than the average wage for all occupations for the Nashville market, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which number was $41,810 as of the last measurement date. This was a very important point to UBS. Like many organizations, they're evaluating going forward, and these are employees who obviously would not be in Nashville were it not for this project, or at least wouldn't be working on this project were it not for this project to move forward. So they will be transparent to everyone else. They might as well be UBS employees, but they may actually be employed by an IT consulting firm or a security firm or a particular area that UBS didn't feel that it had adequate expertise in, and they wanted to have those particular positions outsourced. Overall, the project is expected to include a $36.5 million capital investment overall in the former Regions building, and so one of the things that we were attracted to was the development, and there's been so much activity going south of Broadway. This really helps attract attention to the northern part of Broadway. So I'll stop there, and if there are any questions.
Thank you. Councilwoman Berry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, ma'am, I did actually have a question about the contractors. We had talked about this. Are those contractors employees that will receive benefits, or is this just a way for them to hire employees that are contractors, so therefore they don't have to pay benefits?
No, I mean, this is not from a business standpoint, from UBS's standpoint, it's not a sort of means to avoid benefits. And in fact, at the compensation level, again, we're only paying the incentive payment for those employees who make more than the average wage. Since they will be making $41,810, they would be subject to receiving health care benefits or at least qualifying in under the Affordable Care Act. So it's not a mechanism at all for avoiding health care benefits. It's simply a business decision that UBS, like many other organizations, is undergoing right now.
Well, and benefits are more broad than just health care, so are they also able to participate in a 401k program? Are they getting vacations, sick days? I mean, do you know?
Well, I mean, so we have not provided, I should say, we have not provided any specific restrictions on the types of benefits that those contractors receive. But as highly compensated employees, and in particular, the types of positions that are most likely to be outsourced by UBS being IT contractors and security professionals, I can only imagine that those are competitive jobs, and the employers would have to compensate their employees with attractive benefit packages in order to retain them. But we have not, I should say, we have not specifically included in the legislation a requirement that they receive 401ks or a certain number of vacation days.
So when we talk about compensating for their employee base, not the contractor base, we assume that we're paying for employees that are going to be part of an organization that is going to pay for benefits. Sure. Across the board. So I don't think we've ever spelled that out in a contract. So UBS is here, correct? Perhaps they could answer the question about what they intend to do with their contractors, if those contractors will indeed be contractors that will be employed with benefits.
Ms. Martin-Olich, I don't know if you want to come address the question specifically.
I'm not sure. My understanding is that they will be receiving benefits. I don't know specifically what type of benefits. This is more for us to hire people for expertise that we don't have in-house. But my understanding is that, yes, they will be getting benefits. I don't know what their plans are, the 401ks. I'm fairly certain that medical benefits are included, and I can get you that information if you require.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds to me like you're treating them like employees.
Correct.
So, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilman Tigert.
Thank you. I assume we're capped at 1,000 employees maximum. If they hire 1,100, we're not obligated for the 500?
No, sir, that's not correct. We on this did not provide a cap on it. We want to incentivize UBS to bring as many employees here as they can, and so we did not cap it at 1,000. And so if they can fill up that entire building, which, as a side note, will be referred to as the UBS Tower. I understand they're going to have signage on top of it. It is uncapped.
Any provision for preference for Davidson County residents versus out-of-county residents?
No, that this is not a pilot or a TIF, so we did not write in there sort of payment preferences that there was in the legislation related specifically to pilots or TIFs that required companies to focus on hiring in Davidson County. Certainly with the geographic location in the center of Davidson County, it is most convenient for people who are in Davidson County to work there, but we're not paying more for Davidson County employees or less for non-Davidson County employees.
So what would be the difference in the economic benefits to the city that their employee be a Davidson County resident versus an out-of-county resident?
I mean, I hesitate to get into this because I'm not sure that I'm fully prepared to answer the question. I mean, if the person lives outside of Davidson County, then presumably the city would not be paying for schools if they have school-age children, or the same level of fire or police protection for them that they might be paying for were they to be Davidson County residents. On the flip side, obviously, if they are residents of Davidson County, they're presumably purchasing more of their goods in Davidson County, and therefore we may be generating higher sales taxes or other taxes such as property taxes on their residents and other sorts of things. So to the extent that they are, regardless of where they live, we would expect to receive sales taxes on purchases that they make during the day, lunches, and whatever else that might be.
Are there any studies that explain the differences as you just described? I'm in Davidson County, so I'm theoretically buying more goods and services. I'm paying property taxes. I'm paying sales taxes versus I'm outside the county. We don't have to pay for X percent of them that have school-age kids. Or on the flip side, we've got more traffic congestion. They may or may not be riding buses or other mass transit town. Are there any studies that show whether it's better from an employee standpoint? It goes once again to the surrounding counties. I mean, this UBS is a regional company. They will employ, I feel certain that their employee base of these 1,240 employees will represent a broad cross-section of the Middle Tennessee area to fill that number of positions. Yet Davidson County taxpayers are bearing the 100% burden of this incentive program, less than what you consider that the state that we're all sharing in. So, how do we sell this to Davidson County versus, why isn't Williamson County participating?
Sure. I mean, certainly Davidson County is receiving 100% of the personalty property taxes on the $36.5 million investment. And I would not begin to get into Mr. Rooker's role as the assessor of property, but it is reasonable to assume that there would be higher overall property values on a building that's fully occupied or has the incremental occupancy that UBS would be providing to this building. So I think the vast majority of the benefit of the things specifically tied to the project are benefits that Davidson County will be receiving. And as you point out, taxpayers from across the state are footing the bill for the state piece of the economic development grants that attracted them. So the taxpayers from across the state, from, Tipton County, Lawrence County, are still paying a piece of the benefit that Davidson County is receiving from this project. And again, I think the vast majority of the workers are likely to come from Davidson County, given both where they're located, the type of the workforce. And so while there is the cost side of it, as you articulated, one of the things that I know has been a sensitive topic for companies when we've talked about this is once you start providing differentiation in terms of we'll pay $300 or some other number for residents who aren't of Davidson County, you start really compromising one of the real benefits of being in Davidson County, which is the geographic center of the region. And so we don't want to put those constraints, which to an employer from outside the region may add a level of sort of question and concern about whether or not they can adequately pull from the workforce. And I think it's one of those sort of unknowns that's a fear, and those sorts of things just end up adding a level of uncertainty that can diminish the perceived value of an economic incentive benefit up front, that ultimately, at the end of the day, if 90% of the employees come from Davidson County, it's not going to end up making any significant difference in the incentive. But a company may model it out saying, oh gosh, well, what if only 30% of our employees come from Davidson County? Then we have a much smaller benefit to the incentive that Davidson County is offering, and they just don't know what that's going to be on the front end going in. And so in an effort to get as much bang for the buck that we're offering as possible, we've tried to diminish those sort of concerns and fear on the outset that companies tend to have when they're going into an unknown process like expanding or relocating.
All right, 5-year deal, the clock starts ticking when they pull the trigger. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what is the procedure to verify the number of employees and contractors?
So it's actually, this is just a resolution because this will actually go before the Industrial Development Board. So they will submit forms to the Industrial Development Board each year. As a side note, and this is really just the mechanics of it, but since you asked, this funds technically per the legislation, the enabling legislation as passed by the council, is a reimbursement for certain qualified expenses, so training and the build out, et cetera. And so what will happen is they will submit receipts to the Industrial Development Board and submit some forms that the Industrial Development Board, my office initially will check and monitor, but then the full Industrial Development Board will check and monitor. And so those will be submitted each year. The measurement date is December 31st of any given year, has to be submitted by February 15th. Then the Industrial Development Board will sort of make the determination and then pass that information back to the Director of Finance to be included in the following year's budget and then paid by sort of, I think it's the end of July or of the following. So you're measured as of December 31 of 2015 and you're paid by July 31st of 2016.
Do seasonal employees count toward this total? I mean, if this is a financial company, I suspect, being in the business I'm in, that there is a workload increase at year end for reporting and questions on what do I do with, this investment to minimize or maximize taxes. So I'm assuming there may be some level of seasonal employees brought in to handle those type of workloads. Do they qualify for the full incentive?
They have to be employed for 26 weeks to qualify. I believe that's correct. So essentially 6 months. So if someone were employed for over 26 weeks, that's, I guess, 2 seasons, but yes, but someone who's employed for 45 days would not qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on that question, if somebody is employed for, say, 27 weeks, and then for whatever reason they're not there, when that report comes in at the end of the year, is that notated there that was only a person that was employed for half a year and they're getting $250 instead of $500?
No, sir.
So a half-year employee, still the company gets the full incentive for having a half-year employee, theoretically?
Yes, sir.
I have 3 questions. You talked about the investment in the building. Do you have a total economic projection as far as this company over the period of this agreement, the impact on the community?
The company has not made public the average wages that these employees will receive. However,
it has to be above the 41.8 number, right?
Just for the contractors, but overall, I can tell. I will. Rena may get upset with me for saying this, but I can say that the expected annual salary will be in excess of $55 million, $50 million. Total for the 1,000 employees.
I want one of those jobs.
For the 1,000 employees.
Let's stay together here.
And so, they're making a $36 million investment in the building, as you pointed out. There is a very significant investment, and that is, would not include the people who are drawn here, spouses, other sorts of folks. I mean, there's a significant economic multiplier on this. But suffice it to say that we believe it is a significant economic impact.
Okay, so you went through the trail of how these annual reports are submitted, first to the IWB and then to the finance director, or to you, finance director, is all in that trail. Is there ever a time in there where the council becomes aware of whether these agreements are being kept up or not?
Yes, sir. Well, we could certainly make any reports available to you, but the way this will actually work will be that whatever amount is to be paid to UBS will be included in a budget. And so when you all review the budget of each year, there needs to be a specific appropriation. And so as with these economic development grants, they are subject, and the company's aware of this, they are subject to annual appropriation by the council. So you all could determine if they have 1,500 employees and are therefore due $750,000. There will be a line item in the budget, $750,000 payable to UBS. You all could amend the budget and take that out. However, that has never happened with Dell or any other agreement that we've had, or Shurian or others that have been subject to this, and that is sort of a commitment that a city makes.
We've learned some hard lessons through Dell that this might be a consideration, Mr. Chair, to consider as we look at the coming budgets.
Councilman, if I could just add here, I think you're on a good idea, and I don't have any problem with what you said. I mean, as we do more of these, which we're trying to do when they're appropriate to create jobs for Nashville, I think that currently, Shurian is in as a line item in the budget, and Dell is. I think it would be appropriate in the course of the budget process to, for the council to ask for, or us to supply a report on each of those that verifies this is how many jobs and how we arrived at the numbers and all that. So I think that's easily something that we should do and can do and will do during the budget process as we get more and more of these going forward.
Consider that request made, Mr. Reedland.
It will be complied with.
All right, thank you. And the last question, on the 3-year window that kind of floats here at the company's discretion, was that a negotiated item, or would it have been better for the city to say, once you get your building and occupancy permit, then the clock starts here, and that would have incentivized them to go ahead and acquire these new hires quicker, rather than procrastinating 2 or 3 years down the road, perhaps?
Sure. So I think for a variety of reasons, much bigger than this incentive, the company has an incentive to hire folks quickly. They've signed a 98,000 square foot lease in the building next door. And so the short answer to your question is it was a negotiated point. This is obviously a significant expansion, 1,000 high-paying jobs. We feel that the Nashville market is a fairly deep market. However, there are understandable concerns about how quickly a company can scale up and attract the right kind of employees. And so this was an important consideration for the company to make. And was a concession on our part that, if it pushes out, that just delays when the city makes its payment. But we're still getting the lease next door, and we hope that we'll get incremental employees.
Okay, and just one last question about relative to the first thing that I brought up. In order to address the partial year employment versus a full year reward, is there any way to address that short of changing the contract?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mr. Cooper?
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Garrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just, again, they had asked several of my questions, and Charlie had, but I would just want, when you have got people knocking on your door to some extent, which is unusual for a city to have individual or have companies like this that want to locate here in Nashville, And that's, I guess there's three things that's, and one of them kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Everybody, we've got the high sales tax, and everybody, talks about coming to Tennessee. We're trying to get people from Davidson County to come to Davidson County and live. Right now, you tell somebody in Davidson County the most they're going to pay is $4.69 on the property tax, no matter what. So if you're an accountant and you're in a big company along that line, you can tell them exactly what their property taxes is, because it's not going to change unless we have a referendum, and the odds are it's not going to happen in this county. So you can put that as a budget, as a line item, as a CPA would, and if it goes less than that, then that's just gravy for them. But the one item that does not ever come up, that I'm sure it comes up in your talk, but it doesn't here on a local basis, is everybody that comes to Tennessee doesn't pay an income tax. And that tends to get lost in the shuffle between we council members, is to realize that people come here and move to Tennessee and move to Davidson County because we don't have an income tax. And that's a big deal. Even when the football teams that come in that play at the Titans, when they play the Titan Stadium, they don't pay their income tax. They actually make more money when they come to Nashville to pay because they don't pay the income tax. If our Titans go to New York City, they pay an income tax. Thank you.
Councilman Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to bring up the obvious, and that is we've had some concerns about our downtown and several companies wanting to do business on campus type environments. And so it's very important that this deal goes through, because what we're doing is we're making sure that we have occupancy in our downtown corridor in these high rises, and also that we have 1,000 people working downtown as opposed to going for locations and getting that campus style corporate environment. And when we compete with these surrounding counties that can offer up land where they can do that campus style, when we can provide these type of incentives and make sure we have occupants downtown, going to Charlie's questions, I think that's a huge benefit. And then for me, north of Broadway is very, very important that we still continue to have occupancy north of Broadway. So I'm happy that we're doing this. I know that last term we had some concern about people leaving downtown searching for that campus style, and for a company to want to come downtown and be in one of the high rises downtown, that's very, very important. And so I think that's critical as we look at this, and I think this is a great win for us, that we're going to have occupancy, people downtown, people shopping downtown, and hopefully people living downtown, especially north of Broadway.
Councilwoman Weiner. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, my comment is more, or my question is more of a comment. I think it would be interesting to look at the correlation between our unemployment rate and the fact that it's so much lower than the state and the national average, and how these economic development initiatives have potentially impacted that in the different industries that these unemployed might be in.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question we talked about earlier, and I will certainly endeavor to get some more specific information from the chamber research staff on that question specifically. Thanks.
Seeing no further comments, those in favor of 2013-845 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is recommended 12-4, 1 against, and 1 abstention. 12-4, none against, and 1 abstention. 2013-846 approves an amendment to the parking management agreement between the Metro Traffic and Parking Commission and the Nashville Downtown Partnership to allow a separate agreement with UBS for the use of up to 125 spaces in the public square garage. May I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Councilman Tigert.
What is the current daily occupancy average in the garage?
Mr. Turner is here from the Downtown Partnership.
I'd have to do some quick math, Councilman Tigert, but there's an average of 114 open spaces out of 1,050 public spaces. So I'm guessing that's about 11%.
So 100 and something spaces open each day average? Mm-hmm. So do we have a full-time or a monthly parking fee that we would charge if I wanted to buy that myself?
We do. It's $115.
So this is a $15 a month break, but
is.
Guaranteeing them 100 spots.
That's right. But the other good thing is for the parking managers, they get one check instead of all those individual checks.
All the individuals, so they'll scan in and scan out, basically. What is our current arrangement on our jurors? At some point, didn't we set aside some spots for jury duty?
Well, there's nothing specifically set aside, but the jurors do park in the garage.
Do we know, what do those jurors pay a day?
It's a discounted rate, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was negotiated through, basically through the courts and with the council.
Do we know are we meeting their needs, or are we turning people away that are serving on jury?
We have not turned people away. I will say it does create a management issue because the number of jurors that come in peak on Monday and Tuesday, and by Friday, they're not there. So it causes a garage occupancy problem. So if you had more deals like UBS in the future, having the jurors in the garage causes a problem because you basically have built capacity for 2 days out of the week.
Well, I understand your perspective, it causes a problem, but providing low-cost, affordable spaces for the people that are being asked to perform their civic duty is also a responsibility of this government to do, too.
Councilman Tigert, hang on one second. I don't want to put you on the spot, but Mr. Townsend, do you know the rate? We happen to have someone here who may absolutely know it.
Yes, it's $8 per day. It was at 12, I believe, and we met, and they were graciously allowed us to park for $8 a day.
Okay.
And we have 120 to 180 on Mondays, and it drops down possibly to 100 on Tuesdays, maybe Wednesdays, and then Thursday and Fridays, it drops considerably.
Have you heard any complaints that we don't provide enough spaces on Monday or Tuesday?
No, sir.
So we're good
Yep.
there. I just don't want us to take away these spaces for people that, need convenient parking for jury duty.
And these jurors coming downtown, it's a very frightening experience. Some of them have never been up to the courthouse, and to have that parking is essential for us to be able to run the trials and juries through.
Okay. Tom, what are the Stallman folks, the spaces we set aside for the Stallman building, what is their rate?
They pay basically the going monthly rate, and it's reserved for them, and about 60% of them use them at night, or 100% use them at night, and about 60% during the day, because there are some live works there. But what it does is basically make sure that they have a spot.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Councilwoman Berry, do you want to pass? Further questions? Seeing none, those in favor of 846 say aye. Opposed, no. 846 is recommended with one abstention. 2013-847 approves a sole source contract with Siemens Healthcare Diagnostics, Inc. for drug testing equipment and maintenance for the state trial courts. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Councilman Tigert.
And can someone explain why this is a sole source contract?
He's on his way back. Tim, thank you for being with us today.
Yes. Yes, sir. This is the machine, the analyzer that runs the drug lab, that runs the drug test, the urine analysis through the state trial courts program. And this is basically just a continuation to keep this machine going. We didn't have to replace the equipment. This is just a contract, and it's basically to buy the chemicals called reagents to run the test through. So we felt that was the most efficient way to handle it.
Sure. So when this machine outlives its useful life, then whatever the future machine might hold would be bid out, and there are multiple vendors.
Right. We believe there are more vendors, but this result, these tests have been affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court as being accurate. So we enjoy that based on this equipment. So I believe there may be another vendor or two that would provide this service, and we will look to them.
Thank you.
When we get to that point.
Further questions? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 848 is unanimously recommended. 847, excuse me. 848, approves an interlocal agreement between Metro Nashville Electric Service and the United States Coast Guard for access to the 800 megahertz emergency radio dispatch and response system. Moved and appropriate second. This is sponsored by Councilman Pardue. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 848 is recommended. 849, Councilmembers Stein and Pardue, approves an application for a grant of $325,000 from the U.S. Department of Justice to the Metro Police Department for the Gang Resistance Education and Training Program. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 849 is recommended. 850, Councilmembers Stein and Maynard, approves a state grant of $4,486,000 to the Metro Health Department for operation of the Women, Infants, and Children's Program. Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 850 is recommended. 851, Councilmembers Stein and Maynard, approves an annual state grant of $1,414,200 to the Metro Health Department for tuberculosis control, prevention, and outreach services. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 851 is recommended. 2013-852, Councilmembers Stein, Maynard, and Langster approves a state grant of $237,000 to the Metro Health Department to provide food to low-income clients. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 852 is recommended. 853, Councilmembers Stein, Maynard, and Langster approves a state grant of $429,100 to the Metro Health Department for implementation of the Golden Sneakers program at child care facilities. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 853 is recommended. 854, Councilmembers Stein, Maynard, and Langster approves an 8th amendment to a federal grant to the Metro Health Department for the continued collection of data on the ambient air concentrations for fine particulate matter by increasing the grant amount by $68,799 for a new grant total of $805,000. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? That was a mouthful, let me just tell you. That was more difficult than native plants. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. 854 is recommended. 855, Councilmembers Stein and Tigert approves an application for a state grant of $7,724 to the Nashville Public Library to purchase tablet computers. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 855 is recommended. 857, Councilman Stein authorizes the Department of Law to settle the personal injury claim of Melody Brown against Metro in the amount of $13,000. May I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Councilman Tigert.
Yes, got a couple of questions about this particular incident.
Captain Hager.
Thanks, Captain, for being here. So what is the protocol if someone cannot be put in a seat belt? Does this happen all the time?
No, sir, it doesn't. And if you think about the back of a police car, they're pretty well restrained anyway. There's a screen separating them from the rest of the vehicle. We do make an effort to put a seat belt on everyone possible, but however, the physical size of some people make that impractical or impossible.
This says due to her height. What would her height have to do with being able to put a seat belt around somebody?
To sit up straight and face forward.
So basically an officer would have the decision to make if it was uncomfortable just to leave them unseat belted.
Well, uncomfortable and physically impossible are debatable. The person could not turn around in the seat due to their height, their knee length, and everything in consideration with the screen that separates the driver and passenger compartments.
Well, our analysis says she could not comfortably sit. It doesn't say anything about physically could not. It just said could not comfortably. I'm just wondering, to me, having a seatbelt on is the most critical element of this. If the handcuffs, I don't know what offense this lady committed to be handcuffed. I assume that she was charged with something, though.
Yes, sir, she was under arrest.
And do we know what that was for?
It was an outstanding warrant, I believe, for...
Okay. Was she at... why wouldn't we have just unhandcuffed her and put a seatbelt on and locked her in the back seat, I guess is my question.
Well, we typically don't transport anyone that's not handcuffed who's under arrest.
What about handcuff in front?
Well, I don't believe that would have solved the limitation in this case. You know, the screen inside the car would not allow a very tall person to sit facing forward. Your knees physically cannot turn around.
I'm really having a hard time understanding this. Is it just me, or is it?
Who are you asking that question to? We all agree it's just you.
So anybody that's short cannot wear a seatbelt in the back of a police car?
Well, short would be different. You could turn around and face forward in the car. Your knees would hit the screen. There's a metal screen, a metal and plexiglass screen that separates the front and back seats. If you're too tall, your knees would hit that screen, and you couldn't turn.
Okay, so should another type car have been brought to transport this lady safely? Looking back on it?
In hindsight, we could always do a lot of things different, but there was nothing to indicate.
Has the procedure been changed to avoid this in the future?
There are alternative arrangements to transport people who cannot safely fit in a car.
And is that policy?
Yes, sir.
And was that policy after this or before this accident?
That possibility existed prior to this, but obviously it didn't occur.
Okay, and so was that what the disciplinary action against the officer stated, or?
That would have been an element of the entire disciplinary action, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's also because he ran a light and had an accident too, if you read the whole analysis.
Stop sign, yes, sir.
Stop sign, excuse me. Further discussion? Those in favor of 857 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. 857 is recommended. 858, Councilman Stein, authorizes the Department of Law to settle the personal injury claim of Dedrick Hardison against Metro for the amount of $11,562. Move for approval. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Councilman Claiborne.
I want to ask a procedural question, and I waited until we got to this because we have two different departments involved here, and both of the Metro employees have received a letter of reprimand. So I'm wondering from police and also from parks, what is the procedure? How many letters of reprimand does a person get before there's some additional punitive action that's taken for negligence or not performing their work well?
Do we want to hear from each department on this or from the Director of Law? Well, Tommy, why don't you start from the Parks Department?
From the Parks Department standpoint, the procedure has been changed so that this person would have a departmental hearing at this point in time rather than a letter of reprimand. And the departmental hearing would include some sort of potential suspension or something like that.
Captain?
They have essentially modified their policy to match our disciplinary policy and our disciplinary grid, if that answers your question.
So are you saying that the police doesn't put letters of reprimand in anymore?
No, a written reprimand or an oral reprimand is still part of the corrective action process under the civil service rules, but so are suspensions and other disciplinary actions up to and including termination.
Okay, but I understood the director to say that, and maybe I misunderstood, that currently that a situation goes to a hearing rather than
In this case, if this case was duplicated, it would have been a departmental hearing request rather than a written reprimand. But written reprimands are still part of the corrective action that can be done in instances with
Okay,
employees.
so when somebody gets a letter, does a second letter trigger some hearing action, or is it 3 letters, or at what point in time do letters not suffice?
Well, a reprimand is essentially one step in progressive discipline policy. You know, typically you would not have repeated reprimands for the same conduct. It would be progressive. The next step would typically be suspension.
Okay, so if you got 2 reprimands, is it possible to have 2 reprimands before something else happens?
For the exact same conduct, not in a close time span.
Okay, so we got 2 different kinds of conduct.
We retain discipline. We consider the entire facts and circumstances, not only of the incident, but how long ago each incident was. So if you had the exact same incident, both close in facts and close in time frame, then yes, it would not be 2 reprimands. It would be progressive to the next level, which would typically be suspension. However, if you received a reprimand for certain behavior 3 years ago, and 3 years later you engaged in the same behavior, then yes, a reprimand could be possible.
Okay. I guess the reason I'm asking the question is that these cases come before the council all the time, and we hear that this person's been given a letter of reprimand. So I'm just wondering at what point in time, do reprimands run out and the employees have to be held accountable to a higher standard?
I'd be happy to send you the entire grid that shows you the time frames and the various sanctions that are available.
Captain, is the police department under the same civil service rules as other departments?
With respect to corrective action and disciplinary action, yes, sir.
I was going to say, Councilman Claiborne, we can get you a copy of the civil service rules, which is what they have to go under through all of Metro, which I assume has that information in it as to what happens after certain points. So we can get that for you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Further discussion on 858. Councilwoman Johnson.
Yes, could I have you to come back up real quick, please? I just wanted to get some clarification on that question. And I know we are going to get that paperwork, but I just have one quick question, and that is, if someone is on corrective action, how long is that window? Is that a 30-day, 60-day?
It depends on the event. Using the term corrective action triggers the civil service definition of corrective action. Within the whole process of corrective action and employee conduct, we have job performance improvement plans and remedial training plans.
Now, are they evaluated each year?
Typically a shorter time frame than a year. Depends on the
so
conduct.
they could come off of corrective action at the time of evaluation?
Yes, you'd be on a corrective action plan, such as a job performance improvement plan or remedial training. It'd typically be every 30 days or less.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion? Seeing none, those in... he will after the meeting. All those in favor of 858 signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. 858 is recommended. 859, Councilman Stein authorizes the Department of Law to settle Metro's subrogation claim against Vanderbilt Medical Center and Medical Necessities and Services, LLC, for the amount of $10,000. Moved and seconded. Discussion? Going once. Going twice. Those in favor of 859 signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. 859 is recommended. 526 and 527, without objection, we'll take together. My intention as sponsors, this will be deferred for 2 weeks, but would like to take them together because there is, before we defer it, there is an amendment to 527 that would be helpful if the committee would go ahead and deal with, to have that attached to the bill for full discussion when it comes back in 2 weeks. So I'll read them both. We'll get a motion to approve, and then once we adopt the amendment, then ask for a motion to defer for 2 weeks. 526, Councilmember Stein and Westerholm approves an amendment to the Metro Code to authorize the establishment of an in-line of duty clinic. And 527, Councilmember Stein and Westerholm approves a contract with Concentra for operation of the Metro in-line of duty medical clinic. For the purposes of moving the amendment, motion is second. The proposed amendment to 527 is sponsored by Councilman Maynard, I believe. Either Councilman Maynard or Mr. Cooper, would you explain the amendment? Mr. Cooper?
The amendment.
I'm sorry.
The amendment requires that prior to this contractor performing any radiology services or furnishing radiological equipment, that would have to be approved by the council by resolution. So that would essentially take a couple $100,000 of expenses out of this contract. So if you needed an X-ray, you would just go to a regular provider where we have in-network negotiated rate, as opposed to having the X-ray done there at the clinic.
Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. May I now have a motion to defer for one meeting on 526 and 527? It's seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, without objection, 526 and 527 are deferred for one meeting. 528, Council Members Claiborne, Stein, and Tigert authorize the Director of Public Property Administration to accept the donation of 1.47 acre parcel of property located on Massman Drive along Mill Creek to be added as green space in the Mill Creek Greenway system. A motion? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 528 is recommended. 543, Council Members Tigert and Scott Davis amends the Metro Code pertaining to sponsorships on park property and the acceptance of sponsorship funds. May I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. 543 is recommended. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.